Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is Sherron Burgess. I am the National Vice President for ICMCP, and I'm also a member of our Atlanta chapter ICMCP board. We want to thank you all for being with us today. We have a really exciting discussion today on winning the cybersecurity recruiting race. And we wanted to have you all join us as we bring in talent acquisition experts, recruiters, even those who have converted from being in those types of roles into cybersecurity, and give you the tips and tricks on how to land jobs in cybersecurity and in technical fields. With us today, we have three wonderful panelists who are exceptional professionals in their fields, and I will introduce them now. First, we have Maliik Baraka, who's a talent acquisition manager at Cox Enterprises here in Atlanta. We have Jamey Kinard, who's an information security and compliance analyst at Togetherwork. He's also a managing partner at Cyber Global Solutions. And we also have moderating our panel today, Kevin Dodson, who is our ICMCP National Chair of Career Placement. So thank you all for joining us today. And as just a couple of housekeeping notes, feel free to ask any questions. We will address the Q&A towards the end of our session. So please put them in the Q&A section of your Zoom, not just in the chat, in your Q&A, so that we can aggregate those questions for later. And there will be a survey at the end of this event. We want to hear your feedback. Give us that feedback so we know how to improve these ICMCP Engage programs going forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Kevin Dodson to lead us in our discussion.
Lead us. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm glad you're all here. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Sherron, and thank you to our panelists for participating in this event. I know I'm excited about it as everyone is. So I wanted to start out, gentlemen, and you can kind of determine who would be the best to answer this question first. But a lot of our candidates are interested in learning just how recruiters work to find the best candidates for cybersecurity roles. In particular, what is your approach to finding candidates to meet the roles that you're filling? If it makes sense, we can start with Maliik and then move to Jamey.
Sure, I'll jump in first. First of all, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to address this group. So in regards to the question specifically, what I'd say is it's very important to have an up-to-date resume, and critically important to make sure that your keywords are embedded within that resume. So what do I mean exactly by those keywords? First of all, you should look at your resume always as a template. There's always a there's always a dynamic document. It's never a static document, and should be tweaked for each position that you applied for. The way you want to tweak it is by going through the job description for the role that you're interested in, going through that thoroughly, seeing what they're really looking for, seeing where there's some repetition of ideas or thoughts or skills that they're looking for, and those are the things that you should use to build your keywords. And the way you embed those keywords is to make sure that they are highlighted in your skills section, if you have that. If it's in your professional summary, it should be in there. And it should also permeate throughout the different descriptions of the roles that you've had previously, because what happens is a lot of these bots that companies are using as part of their applicant tracking systems, those bots will scan through your resume and look for those keywords. And typically what you'll see then is it'll generate a percentage match. And so the higher your percentage, the more keywords the bot has been able to find. And then that equates to the bot and oftentimes to the recruiter that you are the resume that they should be looking at. You're the individual they should be speaking to, because it seems like you might have the greatest chance of being a match for a position.
Awesome. Jamey, what is your take?
Hello, guys. I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to be on the panel today. Really appreciate it. I really think Maliik hit it on the head. I've worked over 10 years in the agency environment, but I've in the agency recruiting environment, but I've also worked a number of years in the corporate recruiting environment. And they are similar but different in many ways. I know many of you are working with recruiters from various agencies. So to give you an idea from that perspective, recruiters are trying to move quickly as possible. They have, 10 plus jobs that they're working on at the same time. So they don't have a lot of time to spend on sorting through a ton of resumes. So your resume really has to match, and it has to match quickly. And so Maliik talked about keywords, and that's really the biggest thing. Having a customized version of your resume for that particular job. So if you see a posting out there, or a recruiter reaches out to you, or you reach out to them, however it goes, you look at that job description, your resume should basically look very similar to that job description as far as what they're wanting. So the keywords that they have on there, you should have on your resume. And as Maliik alluded to, and I'll give you a personal example. When I worked for a company called the Intersect Group, we had software that we would plug the job description into this software, and it would basically pull up the top 5%, however many we'll want it, of the resumes that match that job description. And I'm telling you, it was very few and far between that we went beyond that 5%. So like Maliik said, keywords are very important. That's what recruiters are looking for, because they're looking for the best match as quick as possible, so they can get that position filled as quick as possible and move on to the next.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. So we'll ask this as a takeaway from that, and I did see this come through, and you mentioned it about the job description and how to identify those keywords. And Maliik also he also referenced the fact that the resume is not a static document, it's a dynamic document that needs to be done. One of our people has asked a question about how do they identify the keywords, and how, the question that we had to go along with that is, what can candidates do to make themselves more marketable to recruiters, specifically in the cybersecurity space, with relationship to presentation or whatnot? If you can take that one, Jamey.
So if I understand your question, correct me if I'm wrong, you're asking how to decipher which keywords to use on your resume?
Yeah, let's start with that, please.
Okay. Yeah, there's no magic way to do it. It varies. However, what I've noticed is most effective is to just take a look at that job description. Whatever that job description or whatever job that you're focusing on, look at that line by line and look at the keywords that stick out, whether it's PCI or whether it's compliance, whether it's risk. You want to have, if it's in that job description, you want to make sure you have those in there in one shape, way, or form. Even if you aren't an expert at it, but you have some familiarity, then put it on your resume. And then before your interview, you make sure you go and prepare yourself to have a conversation on that keyword. So it's okay to not be an expert on everything you put on your resume. It's if you can have that conversation so that they know you have an understanding of it. Because once you get in that role, you can always learn various aspects of cybersecurity. I remember when I became, moved into risk and compliance, I didn't know everything there was about it, but I spoke on it prior to going into it because I had a familiarity based on my own personal research. And it's okay when you get in into an interview to say, to be able to speak on it and say that you are not an expert on this particular thing, but you do have this experience and this knowledge. So that's, if there's one thing I would say, tailor it to the job description. Go do your research on your own so that you can have a conversation about it, that you can let them know you understand what it is, and then go from there.
All right, Maliik, what is your thoughts on the subject?
Yeah, I think that, Jamey summed it up very well. What I'd add to that is really an idea I think that I pulled from a conversation that, the four of us had earlier in this process, which was about building a word cloud. And there are lots of free software options out on the web where you can go and use a word cloud building tool, which will allow you to take that job description and parse it into that word cloud program. And once it runs, it will actually create a word cloud with different sized words, and the different sizing lets you know how frequently that word appears in the job description. The larger words are the words that emerge as your keywords for your resume. So those are the ones that you want to make sure are integrated into it. Another thing that, I think Jamey said that was extremely impactful was about doing your homework, doing your research. And so for the things that you might not be strong in or even have experience in, research to just gain some understanding, because that sends a lot of positive messages to the recruiters. One, it shows that you've done your homework, that you've taken the time to prepare yourself, which always looks good. It shows them that you are going to be forthright about what you know and what you don't know, so that they can make educated decisions, that you're making an educated decision about pursuing this role, and you're just not trying to find a job, right? The other thing is it shows them that, you have that capacity to learn new things, and you have the desire to learn new things because you've already immediately demonstrated that in the recruiting process. So those are my adds to that.
All right. Yeah, I do recall that conversation, and I know I've used that technique in the past to, modify not only my job description, but my resume, because it is important to say, what is your resume saying in comparison to what the job description says, which gets you further in there.
Absolutely.
I would ask this of you guys, when you get to the top 5% of the resumes, which, are weeded out through the bot, what sets the candidates apart at that level to say, okay, who are the first ones that you actually look at once you get that weeded down list, and how can our participants really differentiate the resume at that level, or once it makes it past the bot, how they can get your attention from there?
Yeah, I can jump on that. It's just to start.
Go for
Just
it.
based on my experiences as a recruiter, once I've narrowed it down to that percentage that I like, really, it kind of, just from a visual perspective, how does their resume look? I like to see resumes that look like they're well thought out, and they are uniform. They have a visual appeal, and there are no spelling errors or grammatical errors and things like that, because I know that person is meticulous and has put some effort into it. And typically, if you put that effort in and you put that presentation out there for someone to see, then you are showing that you have a really strong interest and care about what you're doing. And that's my opinion. And I think that the resume is really the first impression of you. So if you want your first impression to be something that someone remembers, then put that effort into it. So when I pull up that 5%, because most of them are gonna already have the keywords that I'm looking for. So what tells me, oh, okay, I'm gonna start with calling Kevin or whoever. I'm looking at how that resume looks to me, how visually appealing it is. I'm looking at kind of how they've referenced what they've done. So if they say they put a keyword of PCI compliance, let's use that as an example. And I'm going to look at their job in their first in their most recent employer to see what they did with it. So if they mention PCI compliance, I would hope to see something in that job description that says, led PCI compliance for this particular application or this particular group. The more the merrier. And I look at also their education, whether they have a bachelor's degree, master's degree, or some certifications along those lines. Anything to show that they're going above and beyond to further themselves. Not everyone goes to college and gets a bachelor's degree. Not everyone goes to college and gets an associate's degree. Some go get certification, and that's totally fine. But I'm looking to see what efforts you're putting in to making yourself grow in that, in cybersecurity or whatever it may be. And that's just kind of how I take a look at it from a recruiter's perspective.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Maliik?
Yeah, I would certainly echo everything that Jamey said. And I just want to highlight one thing in particular of how important it is that your resume is clean and error-free and properly formatted, especially because you're in the IT space. That level or attention to detail is super critical because, again, as he said, it being the first impression, you don't want your first impression to be that this person has low attention to detail, because you don't want that to have a slight psychological impact on the hiring leader to say, well, if they can't get their resume clean and error-free, how can I expect that in the job? How can I expect that in their work? So that's not the message you want to send. You want to immediately start off putting them in the space to where they feel like this is a competent individual, that, this document speaks well of them, and it gives them confidence to say, okay, I know that they can handle things. And I know that they'll be able to come in and handle the work in a way that I don't have to worry about checking behind them. So to that point, don't put your resume together in a bubble. Share your resume with your mentors, share your resume with your colleagues that you trust. Make sure that you have other eyes on it, because what we tend to do is we go through our resume and we engineer it and re-engineer it and re-engineer it. And after a while, there becomes a level of fatigue that happens and you start missing those details. So it's important to make sure that you have other people take a look at it so that you can avoid that, and that doesn't become a knockout for you. Because I can tell you, myself and countless other recruiters that I've worked with, immediately if the resume is full of errors, we're moving on to the next.
That's good. That's good. All right. I want to take that as a segue. We talked about a little bit about which platforms make more sense. Now, in this social media environment that we live in, a lot of people are choosing to use different platforms like LinkedIn and other platforms to really kind of find jobs or network. I'm kind of curious, and I'd like to get your take on which one weighs a little bit better, the professional profile from LinkedIn or a resume that you submit on Indeed. A lot of, I know me from a professional standpoint, in years past, I have leaned more heavily toward updating my LinkedIn profile to make sure that it's aesthetically sound and all the information is there, and then applying to jobs from the LinkedIn platform, which does, a little bit of parsing. But in your take or in your experience up to now, which one actually weighs more on a recruiter, being able to find someone via LinkedIn as a social media platform, or the resume being directly submitted?
Yeah, I'll jump in with this one. And what I'll say is that in this day and age, you really need the full court press. And by that, I mean, you need to make sure that your resume, if it's posted on Indeed or anywhere else, that needs to be up to date. Your LinkedIn profile is super key, right? So you want to make sure your LinkedIn profile has that professional photo, it has the background photo, it has your headline, the links to websites, it has your education, it has your summary. It needs to read very well, and beyond that, make sure that you're active on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is the biggest outlet right now to display your professional brand. So the things that you've done, the things that you're interested in, the things that you support, even the articles that you like or that you post or what have you, all of that equates to establishing a snapshot of your professional brand, and people get a sense of who you are professionally before they even have a conversation with you. The other thing I want to highlight with that is make sure that if you are active on other social media outlets, your Twitters, your Facebooks, or what have you, separate your personal from the professional. I can't stress that enough. how impactful it is for someone to look for you on Twitter, and your Twitter is full of things that might be deemed unprofessional by folks that are looking to hire you into a role. Or your Facebook is at Facebook, obviously you can lock Facebook, so it's easier to do that there. But with Twitter being typically having such a public viewing, be very mindful of what you're putting on there. And if, whenever possible, create a professional Twitter page and a personal Twitter page.
Awesome. Jamey?
Yeah, I can't agree enough with Maliik. I think that both LinkedIn and Indeed and any other site that you could post your resume are all in play here, and you should be at the top of your game on each one of them. It's just like anything else. I relate a lot of things to sports. There are a lot of people that play sport, kids that play sports that are trying to go pro, but they have to stand out in some kind of way so they can get the attention and the opportunity. So it's the same thing with trying to find a job or a career. How are you going to stand out from everyone else? So if a recruiter looks at your profile, or if an employer or a potential hiring manager looks at your profile, what makes you stand out? If I look at your LinkedIn and I see you have your background updated, I see you have a really professional picture and things, and your write-up is crisp, and your stuff is up to date, and then I look at your resume and it's really refined as well, I'm really going to reach out to you more than likely, as long as you have met the basics of the job description. So like I said, I think that some recruiters go specifically by the job, by their resumes. I will to a certain extent, but I also want to see what separates you. So those types of things come into play, and some hiring managers will actually look at your social media. They'll Google your name and see if you have something on there and that could potentially weed you out. So like Maliik said, make sure it's separate, and go.
Awesome. That is good information. Next, I would like to ask, you kind of segue into, social media is part of your soft skills set. So with that being said, what is your take on soft skills during, the recruiting process and the interviewing process? There are a lot of people in the IT space that are not comfortable with, speaking or communicating. They really are the doer types, put your head down and just do the work. What is the importance of soft skills to the recruiting process as far as weeding out candidates upon the initial contact?
Yeah, if I could jump in first, I think, to me, I'm really a big proponent in soft skills. I think that, you don't have to be an expert at everything required in that job or asked for in that job description. But if you can portray yourself as someone who is highly motivated, a team player, great attitude, and looking to grow in the areas that you may be deficient in, that will go a long way in your interview. So in cybersecurity, there are a lot of technical folks out there, and they may know all the technical pieces of it. But in cybersecurity, now the trend is you need folks that not only have that technical aspect, but have that social component to be able to interact with the business side. Because a lot of what we do in cybersecurity is not only technical, but it is also working with the leaders, the business leaders, and the folks that are not technical. And so you have to be able to toe that line between the two. So if that's something you're not comfortable in, which is fine, but look for ways to grow in that area, whether it's taking some sort of class or practicing with friends and family, colleagues, people you trust, whatever it may be, so that you can get yourself in a position where you can show your real personality. Because a lot of us in our normal lives have great personalities. We're chit-chatting with our friends, talking junk, whatever it may be. But then when we get in a professional setting or an interview, we freeze up. We feel like we got to be a robot. But that's not what we want to do. We want that same excitement, that same charisma, that same personality to come out in that interview. Never be afraid to be who you are. But as long as you're being who you are in a professional manner. I'm not saying you use a lot of slang and all that, but your attitude, your confidence, let that shine when you speak, not only with the recruiter, but the hiring manager, whoever. Let them see who you are. And a lot of times, if they like you and they like your attitude and kind of your drive, and they can see it, then they will overlook some of the deficiencies that you have in your background. So
Awesome. Thank you for that. Maliik?
Yeah, I mean, Jamey said some really big things there. A couple of things I want to piggyback on are, I really like to highlight the 3 C's, right? The 3 C's are clarity, confidence, and compelling, right? The clarity of your communication, as Jamey said, the level of confidence that you're bringing to the conversation, and you compel people with storytelling. Storytelling is one of the most powerful tools that you will have as a professional. And the earlier you start developing your storytelling abilities, the better, right? When we talk about storytelling, we're talking about making sure that as you're sharing, there's structure, there's a buildup of interest, and that you share emotion, right? Like Jamey mentioned, like, don't be afraid to bring your personality. Don't be afraid to be transparent about your experiences, because those are the ways that you connect with people. And to his point, when you can connect with that person, that potentially goes a long way in helping you gain ground on skills or experience you might not even have. You know, most of you probably have heard the old adage of people like to do business with people they like. And the way you go about immediately developing that rapport and developing that relationship is by leaning into those 3 C's. Again, that's clarity, confidence, and being compelling. I think beyond that, like I said, I think Jamey said it really well. So I won't step on that too much. Now I'm gonna let that breathe, because that was very powerful, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That is some great information, guys. So, all right. So let's see. One of the things that we had a question was just some of the key takeaways from this event. How best to beat the bot. We talked about, putting in the keywords, the formatting. Is there a particular type of format or resume submission, whether it's PDF or Word, that translate better when submitting that via the bot?
It's a good question. I think that from my experience, it's best to have your resume in multiple formats, and typically sites are good now about specifying what format you should have or you should submit it in, because they do that because that site has been optimized to be able to parse that type of document, right? So make sure that it's clean in all of those formats. Word doc is still pretty much the standard, but oftentimes you'll see folks asking for a PDF. Being able to convert from Word to PDF, again, should be something that you should be able to do with a relatively low investment, right? But just be mindful of what they're asking for. And just as an add-on, if they're not asking for a cover letter, if they're not requiring a cover letter, don't put a cover letter. Because a couple of things are going to happen. If the hiring leader is actually not looking for a cover letter, the recruiter's not going to read it anyway. And if they do read it, you may put yourself in jeopardy if your cover letter is not exactly saying what they're looking for. And now you've given them additional information that you didn't need to provide, and now it's doing more harm than good.
That's interesting. What's your take on that, Jamey?
Yeah, I mean, I agree totally with Maliik. Multiple formats is the best way, and a lot of the software that we're dealing with nowadays, you know, it would direct you to enter which formatted they're looking for, which works best for that program. So I would say that doesn't matter as much, but you should definitely have both copies. And both of them should always be updated that you can send on the fly.
Okay, before I go to the chat room, I do want to ask one more clarifying question. So, you know, knowing that there's chronological and different format types of resumes that really work within the business environment, for a cybersecurity professional, you know, I've got more than 20 years of experience. How do I differentiate myself as far as a resume goes? Is it looking for, you know, date, information, how many years on there, or is it strictly, you know, the one-liner zinger bullet points that is sorting through to determine, you know, my qualifications, my LinkedIn, and I'm really meaning more from a format of, you know, do I start with the bullet point education at the top, put it at the bottom? Is it going to differentiate when parsing this resume, differentiate the different format styles, chronological information in there? How best to clarify that information in a resume?
Yeah, I think from a perspective, programs, it's just really going to pull up the keywords. So it doesn't matter, you know, from that perspective, doesn't matter where you have it, because they're going to pull up how many times you have it and if it's there. So, but I always recommend in a resume is that you at the top of your resume, you have some sort of summary of skills, like an opening summary and a direction of what you're trying to do. Because a lot of recruiters, they don't even make it past halfway through your resume, honestly. A lot of recruiters, and I'm using myself as an example because, you know, I was doing that for quite some time, is that like I would really only look at your last 2 employers. Beyond that, I'll just, you know, if I was really interested in, once I identified you as a person, then I'll really go through the remainder of it. But I'm probably looking at the first, your most recent, and the one before that. Those 2 employers is kind of what a lot of recruiters are focusing on. And if you don't hit them within those 2, they're going to move you to the side. So I would say at the top, make sure you have highlight keywords of what you're doing or what you know, so that when I first look at your resume, I see, oh, he has this, or she has this. Boom. Then I'm going to go to their job, their most recent employer, and look at, okay, what did they do within that? That's just kind of the way a lot of recruiters approach it. So from a bot perspective, just make sure you have all the keywords, in my opinion. But from just an overall look and feel, make sure you have some sort of all the keywords or summary or something at the top of your resume before you move in, and including your education, and before you move into your employer stuff.
Awesome. Maliik?
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And I will double back to your question and your reference of yourself of having 20 years of experience in the space. And when you have that much experience, you know, you want to make sure that all of that is captured. But obviously, when you have that many roles over the course of 20 years, now it starts to elongate your resume, right? And there's where I recommend, okay, instead of having, here's my job, here's what I did, here's what I accomplished for each of those roles you had over the past 20 years, now it's time to start consolidating information, right? So, you know, as Jamey talked about, having that professional summary, you know, or skills summary, and then within that, you're capturing all that you've done over the course of those 20 years, all that you've accomplished over the course of the 20 years, in a more compact, precise format. And then the jobs, you're just listing the jobs. Here's the company, here's the role, here's the time that I did it. And so then that becomes a section of your resume that's just more compact. So now you're looking at the opportunity to build your resume still as a one-pager, at most a two-pager, as opposed to what could potentially be a 3 or 4 page resume.
Wow, that is a paradigm shift for me, mainly because I know most of my resumes have been exactly that: job description, title, you know, key points as the work, and then, you know, key takeaways. So that is amazing. So would you, and I don't want to, this is a off track or off script question here, but since like just like many of our people watching, you know, are seasoned professionals, is it better to translate everything that you've done into a summary? You know, I've, you know, been at this location, did this and led this project to accomplish this thing, as a summary, to shorten that same, to accomplish the same thing, but in a more summary format instead of a bulleted format. So giving a paragraph, 3-sentence, 2-sentence summary for each of the jobs, or, you know, each of the roles. Would that be something that recruiters would accept or want to see, or be more palatable upon the resume parsing area?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that it's shades of gray, right? Because there's that line or threshold of where it makes sense to do it in a way where things are more compacted, right? And put together into those, you know, 3 or 4 buckets, like I said. But if you don't have that level of experience, you want to be a little bit more explicit about what you have accomplished, right? When you have 20, you know, 15, 20 years of experience, you can afford to have it a bit more compact, because immediately what that signals is, well, this person is a seasoned professional. They've been doing this for a while. I can have a conversation with them and extrapolate anything that's not captured here. But when you don't have that much experience, that calling card becomes that much more important, and you want to be a lot more explicit about what you have done at the various places. The other thing I'll say about that is, even with that compacted resume, you still want to have an elongated version for your reference, because what tends to happen is, as you're applying for roles and it parses your resume, it's going to identify all the different jobs that you've had, and it's going to request that you populate information in there to say, here's what I did at this job, this job, this job, so on and so forth. So having that other resume just for your reference, so that you can copy and paste from that on the fly, is going to save you a lot of time and make you a lot more efficient as you apply for the different roles.
Awesome, awesome. Jamey, what is your take, sir? Did we lose Jamey?
Jamey, you're on mute.
Sorry.
All right.
I mean, I totally agree with Maliik. I think that you can do it either way. But if you're going to do the summary for under the job, then make sure it's a good summary. Because recruiters, we want to work fast, and we don't want to do a whole lot of work. We want you to hit us quick with what you got, and so we can keep it moving. So we don't want to sit here and read a whole huge story about your life, you know. And I'm just keeping it real. We want to see what you've done, so we can get an idea of your background, and that way we can say, hey, okay, this person is going to go in this particular bucket, and I'll follow up with them later. So a lot of times we might go through 50 resumes. All right, so we can get a good 5 to 10, and that way we can follow up on those 5 to 10, or deep dive into those 5 to 10, however we want to do it. So we're really trying to weed people out more than anything. So if you're going to do a summary, keep it simple and make it impactful. Make sure you're covering things that are specific to that job. But you know, the bullet points tends to work best in my opinion. But yeah, I think you can go either way.
Awesome, awesome.
If I could add one more thing to what Jamey just said, Kevin, just again emphasizing making things as easy for the recruiters as possible and making the experience as quick as possible, because putting it in context, that recruiter is trying to find the best person for the job, or 5 to 10 people to submit to the hiring leader, right, for them to review. But that's weeding out of, for you know, typically in cybersecurity jobs, you post a job, you're going to get, depending on the level, you could get anywhere from 50 to 100 candidates. And so we have to go through that 50 or 100 to find that best 5 or 10 quickly. But that's one of potentially 10, 15, or 20 jobs that recruiter is responsible for. So think about the volume that recruiter is having to manage, the number of people that they're having to sift through, and keeping that in mind. That's why, as Jamey said, keeping it as brief and concise and clear is so important.
Yeah, and if I could throw in one more quick note on that, because Maliik brought up a good point about recruiters working on multiple jobs. But you know what? Recruiters are also competing against each other. So a recruiting agency may have 15 or 20 recruiters, and you know, they may, you know, be working on the same jobs. So they're working as fast, as quick as possible, so they can get the candidates into that account manager to send over to that hiring manager. So they're working as fast as possible. So, you know, just pointing out what Maliik said, you know, you want to be impactful early so they can get your resume and get it in. And they're competing against each other because they're seeing the same people. So like you might get contacted by 2 recruiters on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how they're competing with each other. So
yeah, I've seen that in recent weeks and months. So we're going to go ahead and shift gears into our Q&A section. We want to give opportunity to answer a few of the questions that have been presented. I have one question in particular that is kind of touching 2 different people. Both Mohammed and Alina asked a question that are similar. So one question is, what if I highly value my privacy and don't want to share on social media and LinkedIn? You know, what is the approach there? And Mohammed adds, you know, how important is it to show a picture of himself on LinkedIn? As Security 101 suggests, you shouldn't share a picture online. How do recruiters look at that?
all right, I'll jump in on that.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly if you don't want to share a picture, you don't have to share a picture. I mean, everybody's privacy should be respected. And that's the one thing about cybersecurity, focuses on privacy. However, from a recruiting perspective, a lot of these recruiters aren't cybersecurity folks. They want to see what you look like. They want to see how professional a professional picture you can put out there to go along with the resume. So although you don't have to put a picture out there, I would highly suggest you do so.
Maliik, what's your thoughts?
100%. And I understand the concerns about privacy online. You know, and there are obviously security measures that you can take. But as it pertains to LinkedIn, like I said, you want to be pretty forthcoming about your professional accomplishments and things of that nature. And as it pertains to the picture, you know, Jamey's, you know, again, spot on. You don't have to put the picture if you don't want to. But what I will call out, since we are in the forum that we're in, is that your pictures is sometimes the first step for a recruiter that is looking for diversity candidates to identify that you are a diverse candidate, right? Because oftentimes that can be a tricky process. And if you look at organizations like mine, there are diversity metrics that we have to meet as a department and that our hiring leaders have to meet, right? And so the goal is to try and tap into as much diversity and talent as possible. And oftentimes our names won't necessarily give you the clue, right? Any experience that you have, but sometimes that picture is that first clue for them to say, okay, this is a diverse candidate that I need to talk to.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. All right. Our next question is also from Mohammed. It is, I am an IT professional with almost 19 years in the field working for a major vendor. We would like to cross over in the security side. Besides certification in cybersecurity, how to cover that experience gap. Though he carries a good bit of experience in network side or data side, how can he cross over into the other field, or what would be a good a way to do that? I believe I'm translating the question correctly.
Yeah, I can jump in on this because this one's very close to me because, like I mentioned earlier, I've been in recruiting forever. Over probably 15 years. I don't know, I've forgotten. But I ended up transitioning over to cybersecurity from recruiting when I was with BCD Travel. And of course, at that time, I didn't really have the experience to make that transition. But thankfully, I had a good rapport within the organization that I could work with members of that particular department, cybersecurity, and ask them, hey, I'm interested in possibly transitioning over to cybersecurity. What are some ways that I could put myself in position to make that transition? And, you'd be surprised, there are a lot of folks in the organization that want to help you. And they may say, hey, and in my situation, they allowed me to shadow certain members of that team, of the cybersecurity team. So I think I did 4 or 5 days of shadowing, where I was just, talking to that particular person. They was telling me about their day-to-day and things like that. And what I would do is the notes that I would take from that shadowing experience, I would go out on my own and do my own individual research to learn more about it. And that way I'm building my knowledge base from that perspective. A lot of people, and certs are good because they show that you have completed something and they show that you now have the knowledge. But a lot of experience is just gained individually. And you can go out on Google or whatever and learn about pretty much anything in cybersecurity. And you take that knowledge, and when the time comes and they ask you about it, you can have a thoughtful conversation about it. You may not know the ins and outs because you're not doing it on a daily, but you can do the research to know how to basically describe what it is that you'd be doing in a role, or what this is about. So I think that when I was making the transition, that was big for me, working within individuals on my own company that were in cybersecurity, working with the leaders so they understood what I was trying to do, asking them what I could do to make that transition, and doing it. And it worked for me. I ended up moving into as an information security analyst role. And, since then I've started getting to a lot more of risk compliance and and a lot more. And it's really helped my career. So.
Awesome. Maliik, you have anything to add?
Yeah, what I'll add to what Jamey said is that I 100% agree with that approach. And as you reach out to those people, just ensure that you have done some pre-work, right? Because to his point, there are going to be people that are out there willing to help you, but not necessarily just hold your hand or take you as this infant in the space that they're looking to raise themselves. So come to the table already having done some work, whether that's the research online, like he talked about. There are tons of meetup groups that are meeting virtually now that, there's the COVID impact. LinkedIn has tons and tons of different groups that you can join in different formats that, allow you to get in there and start learning the language. Because that's what's super key about transitioning from one vertical to another, whether it's, into IT or out of IT into something else. You got to start learning the jargon. And by being in those groups and hearing the conversations and seeing the dialogues back and forth that, that people are talking about, that starts to get you immersed in that environment and makes that transition that much easier once you start learning the language.
Awesome. I think that is really good information. I think one of the professional groups that I've joined mentioned that part of the strength of many candidates in networking is joining different groups to show that you're engaged in the community that you want to be in. Some of the people here, and I'm just going to paraphrase one of the questions that was asked, is, they're transitioning from a more technical field into the cybersecurity space after so many years. And their concern is, how do they take their technical skills and translate them in such a way, or rewrite their resume or their presentation in a way to present that their interest and abilities within the cybersecurity arena? Because like many may be learning now, IT is not necessarily the same thing as cybersecurity, and there is a distinct difference between the different types of skill sets that need to be addressed. How do you do that, and how do you even relate that information to your LinkedIn profile? Is it best to just copy it direct, copy paste, or re-paraphrase?
Yeah, so Sherron, you're about to speak?
Yeah, I can just maybe add something to that. One of the things that we offer to our ICMCP membership is we direct people to go to cyberseek.org, and we also have a tool called Competency Core. And with cyberseek.org, where you're able to kind of take and look at the different types of jobs that are available that may leverage the types of skills that you have. In addition to that, our partnership with Competency Core allows you to go in and assess the skills that you have in line with the National Institute of Cybersecurity Education and the types of skills, knowledge, abilities that are in specific job roles within cyber. Essentially what that means is you can take the skill that you have today, where it may not be in cybersecurity, and be able to map how that may fit into a role that you're interested in. That's one way for you to be able to translate what you have into what you're looking for. It doesn't mean you have to start over. And I think that's really important for those who are transitioning, that there are tangible skills within cybersecurity that can be gleaned from other industries that are absolutely needed within the industry here.
Awesome. That's a great resource. Listen, I know we only have about 3 more minutes, so I wanted to just take this time to encourage anyone who is actually taking the time to join us today. Please check out the resources that have been provided through ICMCP. We are really working hard to put on good content. I'd like to thank Jamey and Maliik for their participation, because it has been extremely valuable. It has been impactful to me, guys. I don't know if you've gotten anything out of it, but I know from my professional approach and standpoint, I am still updating my professional branding. So I think this information is very helpful to understand how we can get in with the different recruiters that we run across and how we can do the approach. I will turn it over to you, Sherron, for final comments and statements, guys.
Sure thing. Thank you, Kevin, for moderating this panel. Maliik, Jamey, thank you guys for your insight. For all of you out there, please go to icmcp.org if you're not a member today. Membership is free right now, and we have tons of webinars and information just like this, and these powerful speakers who are able to help move the needle forward in terms of making cybersecurity more diverse. A couple of things I do want to just highlight as a takeaway. Number one, please click the survey link. We again want to hear your feedback. A couple of takeaway points that I wrote from this panel that I wanted to share with you all. Number one, your resume is your first impression. What impression is your resume giving and providing if no one has ever met you? Your LinkedIn is important. It's your professional brand. Are you active? Have you separated your professional and your personal life from a social media perspective? Recruiters, hiring managers are looking at both. So what does that say about you again before they've even met you? The 3 C's of communication: clarity, confidence, and being compelling. Improve your storytelling abilities. If you don't have that ability to do that today, work on it. Continually try to work and develop yourself. Your cover letter is not necessary unless it's asked for. That's really critical. No one's going to read it. It might be amazing, but if it hasn't been asked for, you're wasting your time, and it can also be to your detriment. Tailor your resume for each of the jobs that you're looking for. Your resume is a template, so make something custom for the job roles will help improve your likelihood of being selected. Using a word cloud to highlight some of the keywords in the job description, so you know how to tailor your resume a little bit further. Do your homework and be prepared, and show your passion, your energy. Work to shadow if you're in a different field. Ask those questions. Join those professional organizations. Learn the jargon so that you can come across as more capable, credible, competent in the roles. So with that, I'd like to thank our partner, Cloud Security Alliance, for supporting this event. I'd like to thank all of you all for joining us today. And you can connect with these individuals on LinkedIn. They're there as well if you want to continue the dialogue and the discussion. Again, thank you all so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all.